Hey guys, this is Gamer Cal. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. Hopefully my throat doesn't die on me too quickly with this one if I have to clear it a bit. It's because there's so much to do here and I'm kind of a little bit under sorts that way anyway. We're on to Evolving Skies, the final set that was the most recent set when we started this whole thing. It was really cool just like seeing the adaptation of this, seeing the evolution as we went along. We do lose the big box mesh from here. Unfortunately, Pepper does not have access to that. We don't know anyone who can make these anymore. And so when we move on to the next set, we will just have the little box with the pack on the front and stuff there as well. It's totally fine. It's completely functional. Nobody really cares that way. But if you have been enjoying just seeing the big box here, just know that it's not going to be a big box anymore. We have a lot to cover, so let's just get to it. Evolving Skies is a big money set for this format because there's a lot of really popular Pokemon in here. It's the Evolution set. It's the return of the dragons as well. The modern iteration of dragons do not have weakness and resistance to anything. They still have their multicolor requirements and stuff, so they're a little bit awkward to play. But when they're good, they're really hard to hit, which is a very important trait for them, I guess. Weakness is absolutely massive in this meta, as we've been finding out in the practice session. So, yeah, not to have a weakness, really, really cool. Yeah, there's a lot of alt rarities and stuff down here as well, some extremely cool ones for like the evolutions and whatnot. In particular, the Umbreon is incredibly expensive, so good luck if you're ever trying to actually complete this set. Also, Zinnia exists in this one, so I guess there's your tax for the day. We do have a mini set over here as well. Celebrations released, I think, in October. It was about a month before Fusion Strike came out, so we are going to include this. There's a few cards in here which are at least fun to play or potentially relevant, so it's worth noting this anyway. But this was the 25th anniversary set, so there are a bunch of throwbacks. These are not legal because they do not have the regulation marks, but if you want to play old formats and whatnot, these are some very popular cards from the time periods that were extremely powerful. And then there's Xerneas. I don't know why Xerneas is in there, but I mean, I guess Yveltal gets too much love, so yay to having the fairy type one this time, I suppose. I don't know. As far as the promos go, there actually are a ton here, including a brand new mechanic that we get almost all of the Pokemon for, so that's kind of cool. We'll talk about V-Unions in a sec when I go up the top. But we do have some of these promos that are not tournament legal. They are part of the celebrations like box here. Dragapult being a Pokemon Prime, they're using old mechanics, so that's why they're not legal. But for whatever reason, like Lance Charizard V and Dark Sylveon are legal? Not entirely sure what the deal with that is, but whatever. If you can't use them, they have the tiny text you possibly can't read, because this really is really hard to read on the scans here, but right down on the border at the bottom, this card cannot be used in official tournaments, so that's what you need to look out for. But it's basically all of, like, you know, Pokemon SP as a mechanic, level X's, stuff like that you're definitely not going to be able to use. So yeah, lots of really fun stuff down in this as well, just to collect. If nothing else, it would be kind of neat, so that is super cool. As you can see, we do have a lot of stuff to discuss here. We've got the whole V-Union thing over here that we'll get into, a lot of cards from the set, plus the celebrations and promo stuff there, and not as many trainers and things as you would expect, to be honest. I guess most of the time you would just think that the first set of a rotation would have a lot of items and stuff to go with. Not so much this time. Kind of interesting. But what is here is quite impactful, so that's neat. So, Pokemon V-Union. As you can see, there are 4 pieces to these. These are effectively Pokemon Legend, but for the modern game. The thing with a V-Union, and the reason why I have them separated here to actually discuss, one unfortunate compromise to building stuff like this is that you do kind of just not get to see what the attacks are here. They're a little bit too hard to read, in my opinion, which is fine because you've kind of just got to make do with what you have here. Pepper's made a fantastic thing for Legends and V-Unions, the multi-card brace, where you can just like stick the cards into the brace and it will automatically sort it too into making the whole picture. So It makes it really easy to play because this is just one card now, and you can kind of do what you need to with that. When it hits the discard, the brace will go away, so it just goes back to being a 4-card thing. And it is very cool just seeing them all properly laid out, right? These are like the actual picture for the thing now. So if you played on PTCGO at the time, these would have like a bit of an animation where they would all like join together, and then you'd be able to look at the thing proper, and it'd be super cool. So yeah, very neat mechanic. The way that this works is if you have all 4 pieces of this specific V-Union Pokemon in the discard pile, once per game you get to bring it onto the bench, combine all 4 pieces, and yeah, throw it just onto the bench immediately. They are free prize Pokemon, as we have the V-Union rule down the bottom here, and they do unfortunately basically just work as like gigantic basics, which, you know, we've just gotten away from, right? But at the same time, these are much harder to get out. We no longer have Pokemon communication, and that is a huge deal because these do not count as basics. They're not evolutions, of course, and they certainly don't have a HP value that you're going to search out, right? Level Ball doesn't do anything for them. So you have Great Ball, and as I found out from side testing stuff, Familial Bell actually works with these. If you have one of these in the discard already, they are all named like X V Union, so you actually can pull one of them out of the deck with that too, which is pretty cool. As far as the generic stuff goes, they have between 300 and 320 HP, and the one thing that they all share is this Union Gain attack. For a colorless energy, they attach up to 2 of their type of energy from the discard pile to themselves. Most of the time this attack is really bad because you're putting your free prizer in jeopardy, and you cannot share all this because it's not an evolution. So healing it, probably not happening. All of them attack for like 3 energy. Zacian has a 4 energy attack, but it's a bit easier to charge, so I guess there is that. They all have free energy as their main thing, so if you Union Gain once, then you should be able to attack with them for the most part, which is pretty cool. And yeah, they're all kind of neat in their own way. I'm going to go from right to left on this because Greninja is the more complicated one because it has abilities all over the place as well. So we'll go from left to right here. So Pikachu, it can attach stuff, as we said. It's a 300 HP lightning type. That's actually really bad at the moment because it means that Urshifu's Gale Thrust just one-shots you, and so you just give up free prizes for nothing. So this one's not particularly good, but oh well. For a lightning and a colorless energy, Shocking Shock will do 120 and Heads will give it paralysis, so I guess that's kind of cool. The Disconnect attack over here is probably the main one this Pikachu is going to use. For 2 lightning and the colorless, it does 150 and prevents the opponent playing items next turn. That's cool, but we already have Vikavolt that does this way better, so like there's not much point in playing this one. And then Electro Ball together for the same energy cost does 250. So that can KO a lot of 2-price stuff. It doesn't KO tag teams, but Disconnect into this does, so there is that. Yeah, Lightning lost all of its remaining tools. If we still had Thunder Mountain, this would probably be playable, but we don't, so whatever. Zacian over here is a free 20 HP dude, which is designed for tanking for the most part. 2 metal and the colorless gets you 150 damage, and the defending Pokemon's attacks do 150 less next turn. The problem with this attack is that it is the defending Pokemon's attacks, which means if this KOs something, or if a switch happens, then the damage reduction goes away. I don't know if we quite realized that during testing stuff, but this attack never came up, so kind of whatever. Steel Cut for the same cost does a flat 200, no added effects or anything there, so a bit weaker than the Pikachu's one, but it's not the primary big attack here. The big attack is Master Blade. 3 metal on the colorless does 340 damage, which will one-shot everything in the game. Even to this day, I think it still technically gets there. Like, there will be some things that survive from abilities and whatnot, but as a raw HP count, I think this KOs everything, even now. You do have to discard free energy from this thing, so it's not repeatable in that aspect, but the deck was designed to use Metal Saucer and Bronzong in order to refuel stuff here. So yeah, 200 is just very slightly short on KOing basic Vs, which is where this thing really falls short in my opinion. Mewtwo is the one that actually saw competitive use in God of War decks, mostly, but also in its own, like, control type thing. It's a very interesting card. It's got 310 HP, and the main reason it actually saw play is Super Regeneration. 2 Psychic and a Colorless, heal 200, don't discard any energy for it either, because why would you need to do that? Yeah, this card actually saw play because there are a couple of formats, most notably with Arceus involved, that don't generally hit over 200 very easily. And so this ends up just being a stall card at that point. You can just permanently heal it, which is insane. For the same cost, Psysplosion is a ridiculous attack. 16 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. What the heck, dude? Like, this is just ridiculous, right? 16 damage counters is 4/5 of the Super GX attack from Cross Division from the Espeon Deoxys tag team, right? And you just get to do this with no cost every turn? Like, the heck is that all about, right? Crazy stuff there. For this, for 1 extra energy, Final Burn will do a flat 300 damage, which is enough to KO a ton of stuff. Especially by the time this saw play with Choice Belt being in the format, this actually will KO VMAXs and stuff as well. We do have an ability on this thing as well. Again, a good reason to go right to left here. Photon Barrier prevents effects of the opponent's attacks done to this thing. So damage counter placement and like auto paralysis, all of that fun stuff, you don't get affected by any of that. So you have to KO this from direct damage, which it can just heal if that direct damage is not sufficient enough. Yeah, this guy's kind of insane just to like stick on the board. 310 is also pretty difficult to take out, so there is that too. Greninja GX, like I said, it's not even the GX, it's the V-Union. I think we had the GX ages ago. Greninja V-Union is the 300 HP, so it is like Pikachu, the frail one here. But it has a ton of abilities as well as the free attacks here. Ninja Body prevents items from affecting this thing, basically. So, pretty sure you can't like Crushing Hammer this as a result. Like, you can't cross-switch this later on either. I don't think Escape Rope actually forces a switch with this either, which is kind of fun. For a single energy, Aqua Edge does 130, so this is the only one that can attack immediately when it comes into play once you put 1 energy on it, so that's kind of cool. Antidote Jutsu prevents it from being poisoned, so I suppose that's kind of neat. There's not really too many poison strats for that, but I guess it would stop the Salazzle deck from being silly, so yay, question mark. Twisted Shuriken for 2 water and the colorless does a ridiculous 100 damage to each of the opponent's bench Pokemon. No drawbacks on that, by the way. Since we just lost Mew, that is unbelievably powerful. And the last ability makes you able to see the opponent's hand once per turn, because why not? Waterfall Bind for the same cost as the Shuriken does 180 and prevents the opponent retreating next turn. Should note that all of these V-Unions also have a 2 energy retreat cost, so Air Balloon is pretty good with them as well. It's kind of neat. I think overall playability, obviously the Mewtwo is the best one. The Zacian is the one that would see the play at the moment because Metal is still a very playable deck. Zacian V is very good after all. And the water from Greninja could actually be kind of neat because Frostmoth is technically playable. The problem realistically is just how are you getting these into the discard? And that's not easy to attain in the moment, so it's a tough balance to actually get these to play. On to the main stuff then. We have Flying Pikachu, which is being noted because of the IC winning deck stuff later, actually. Art Peak was actually a pretty big deck. Flying Pikachu is 190 HP but 0 retreat. Unlike most lightning types, it does actually retain the flying type thing here, so it's weak to itself and resistant to fighting. Very good for a lightning type actually to be resistant to fighting, so that's kind of cool. Its attacks are mostly irrelevant, but Fly does very occasionally come up. If you flip Tails, it does nothing for free energy, which sucks, but if you flip Heads, then you are agility immune basically to everything in the opponent's next turn. So that's kind of cool. This is literally just a big version of the original Flying Pikachu that came out as a promo in Gen 1, so that's neat. It does have a VMAX, however, and this is what actually makes it pretty good. For a Lightning and 2 colors, you do 160, go up to 310 HP as well, which is kind of neat. And during the opponent's next turn, this does not take any damage from basic Pokemon. So any deck which does not have like V-Star, V-Max Pokemon to go through, like the Reggies, for example, just gets dumpstered by this. So, pretty cool. There's a Raichu in the set. I don't think it's too good, but it's kind of interesting at least. For 1 lightning energy, 130 HP on this thing, so we're getting a little bit bigger on the Raichu as well. 50 damage to each V and GX Pokemon in play. Since there's a lot of V and VMAX stuff going on at the moment, that could do quite a lot, but the problem is that the Inteleon engine is in literally every single deck, and Inteleon is not a Pokemon V. So, there is a Inteleon that is, but it's not the one that's played. So, yeah, unfortunate there. Gyarados and Gyarados VMAX I'm mostly noting because there was an Arceus deck that actually won like a regionals with this, which is kind of neat. It can destroy all spell traps on it. It can't do that, but Heavy Storm is pretty neat anyway, just to have as an attack, right? Salaman's V had this before, so it's kind of fun. Get Angry is something you might actually see if you play Memory Capsule. This for 2 water and the colorless does 20 for each damage counter on the Gyarados. It's a pretty big Pokemon, like 220 to 330 HP here, so that's kind of cool. So, I mean, maybe you'll see it. Memory Capsule is playable because of the Jolteon, so who knows, like, you could deny stuff that way. Hyper Beam on the VMAX that does 120 for that same cost as Get Angry, but it automatically discards an energy on the opponent's active. That's kind of cool. Energy Denial is always fun. And Max Tyrant for 1 more water energy does 240. It's not particularly good at the moment, although the lightning weakness is not the worst thing that we've ever seen. And yeah, it's alright. Like, it's fine. It is definitely playable, but it is probably not the best water type you could use with Arceus at any point. But it won a regional, so there you go. We're skipping over the Vaporeon V because it's not very good, but the V Max is at least interesting. This is a Rapid Strike Pokemon that has 320 HP, and the cool attack here is Bubble Pod. For 1 colorless energy, you put a water Pokemon from your discard pile onto the bench, and attach up to 3 water energy from your discard to that Pokemon. This does not say basic, as we always note with these things, so this means you could put like another Vaporeon VMAX down, or you could put a crazy like stage 2 or something in to play with it. Max Torrent does do up to 200 damage for water and the double colors if you have any damage counters on the opponent's active Pokemon already, so play this with the Inteleon engine so you could make it capable of that, and it's at least neat. I'm not convinced. I think it's just too much setup for the stuff here, but it's at least fun. Jolteon is a really good deck that just gets bodied by every Urshifu in the format, which is unfortunate. 190 HP, 0 retreat on the basic V here. Thunder Spear for a colorless energy does 20 to one of the opponent's Pokemon. It's not that much, but we'll see why the colorless matters later on. Pin Missile, kind of irrelevant, but the VMAX is what we're really interested in here. 300 HP sucks. Let's just get this out of the way now, because it means that you do die to Gale Frost in one shot, just like the Pikachu V Union. That is why it's kind of unwinnable to play against Urshifu. But Max Thunder Rumble is a crazy attack and definitely something to build around here. For a Lightning in the colors, you do 100 to the active, but you also do 100 to one of the opponent's bench that has a damage counter on it. So that's really, really sick, to be honest. 200 damage for 2 energy, 1 energy when we get down to the bottom. And yeah, it's unbelievably powerful, actually. I will note the colorless in the Vaporeon's attack cost here as well for the same reason. We'll get to that when we get to the trainers down the bottom. The Flareon, unfortunately, really, really bad. It's an eruption style attack, so it's just not worth it. Neither is the Espeon V, which is a shame because the base, like the artwork for it, is really cool. But Espeon VMAX did actually see some success later on in Arceus builds with its Solar Revelation ability. But if you have an energy on one of your Pokemon, it prevents all effects of attacks done to that Pokemon. So it means that you get to stop auto paralysis shenanigans, and that actually was pretty big in a couple of regionals later on. There was like an Articuno, there's a Zekrom at the moment as well that can auto paralyze, but there was an Articuno that was played quite a bit to do that as well, because a lot of decks just didn't play switch cards and whatnot. So being able to prevent that paralysis is really strong. This effectively is just mist energy on body, right? So kind of cool. Umbreon, I'm going to note both the V and the VMAX here because they're both good for different reasons. This is a single strike Pokemon this time round, so that's pretty cool. Gets to use single strike energy and the Houndoom engine to get more damage out. It will need that damage as well, as we will see. 200 HP, Mean Look prevents the opponent retreating, does 30 damage for 1 energy, kind of neat. Moonlight Blade, if you have any damage counters on the Umbreon, does 160 for 3 energy, so accelerate single strike energies out of the deck with a Houndoom. Has damage counters on it, you'll probably do about 200 damage on average with this. Kind of cool. It's a Dark Pokemon, obviously, so good typing for in the future formats, especially in the next one. And yeah, that's not too bad. But it does evolve, of course. 310 HP on the VMAX, a little bit frail, but that's all the evolutions, basically. It has Red Signal, but as a Dark Signal this time. Basically, if you evolve into this thing, it gets to Gust, one of the opponent's stuff. It's technically Bright Look is the ability, not Red Signal, and that's the Genesect one, but it's the same idea. Gust on evolution. This is what the original Umbreon did, EX did as well, if I remember rightly, so kinda cool. Max Darkness for 1 Dark and double colorless does 160, so not the strongest out there, but again, scale it up with a couple of single strike energies, it can do 200 or so. That's pretty reasonable, and mostly the weakness is kind of important here. But yeah, realistically, this is hitting a ton of damage on psychic stuff, but it also just gives you Gust options to make sure you don't have to boss every turn, right? You can play a consistency supporter and a boss, which is really cool. Leafeon V is solid, to be honest. 200 HP and an attack that's irrelevant, but Greening Cells is really good. You end your turn using this ability, but you get to search your deck for a Grass Energy and attach it to one of your Pokemon. Fantastic opener, and basically cheats out an extra energy on the first turn going first, which is really good because the VMAX actually has some pretty good traits going forward as well. 310 HP, 2 retreat, kind of irrelevant, but it's used, I guess it's good against itself because Grass Knot for a Grass and Colorless does 60 for each retreat cost the opponent has. And put Galamine in play with this, most Pokemon are going to have like a 4 retreat because they have a 2 as a default, and so you do about 240 damage for 2 energy. On a Cheryl compatible Pokemon, pretty respectable. Max Leaf is something I forgot about in testing, but definitely don't forget about this yourself. For 2 Grass and the Colorless, it does 170 and heals 30 from this Pokemon. 170 is not like that amazing or anything, but it is an attack that you can use that does not rely on the opponent having a retreat cost, because Rapid Strike Pokemon can kind of mess you up a bit with Galamine. Air Balloon also messes this up a bit, but that's why they play Tool Jammer, so they can shut off the Air Balloon, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, strong card overall. Glaceon V is not nearly as good, but it does have Frozen Awakening, which is basically Ascension. So 1 energy evolve this thing from deck, which is kind of neat. And you do want to do that because Glaceon VMAX is designed specifically to block stuff from other VMAXs. Its ability prevents all damage done to it by the opponent's VMAX, which are the main Pokemon of the format, so that is interesting. Max Ice Skull does 150 even for water and the double colorless, and it does 30 to one of the opponent's bench as well. Yeah, Glaceon's not super good because it just doesn't do damage. Like, Glaceon doesn't tend to do damage, right? It's there to try and disrupt stuff, but its disruption is always super weak, so unfortunate. The opponent can just like not evolve and just use their regular Vs for stuff here, and you don't do enough damage to pressure that, so that's a bit of a shame. And any deck that doesn't use VMAXs is going to just slaughter this thing. So sorry Glaceon, not super good, but good enough to note here, I suppose. Sylveon is also really good. This is a Rapid Strike Psychic Pokemon. Again, Fairy got folded into that. Magical Shot's terrible, we don't care, but Dream Gift is really good. It lets you search your deck for an item card and then end the turn for doing that. But that's fine because it sets you up for next turn, and what you're setting up for is not terrible in its own right. Sylveon VMAX is 310 HP, and it has 1 good attack and then 1 situational thing if you play Psychic Energy. Attach an energy from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon for a single Psychic, heal 120 from that Pokemon. Kinda cool, probably not coming up, but if you do play basic Psychic, then it's neat. Most of the time you're going to play like Darkness Energy or Fighting, depending on how much you're into Rapid Strike box, so we don't tend to have that come up too much. Max Harmony for 3 colorless energy does 70 plus 30 for each different type of Pokemon on your bench. Yep, this is literally just Rainbow Road all over again, but we have a lot of good support for this at this time. just like we did with the Xerneas, to be fair. But this is really solid. It's a Rapid Strike Pokemon, so it does get the effective double colorless part of Rapid Strike energy. It doesn't take specific energy to play, which means you can use it with any sort of accelerant that you can get your hands on. It's kind of cool. The Galarian birds, the Articuno, Moltres, Zapdos, all get cards here. They all have the same general trend here. When you play them from the hand to the bench, you can attach up to 2 of their type of energy from the hand to themselves, and then they have an attack that takes 2 of their type plus a colorless and does stuff. For Psy Laser on the Articuno, you discard all the Psychics on it and do 120 to one of the opponent's Pokemon. Kind of neat. If you play Capture Energy or something as the last one, you can get away with only paying 2 energy. That's somewhat cool. Unfortunately, it's a bit hard to recharge at that point, but oh well. The Zapdos does not have a retreat cost, which is kind of neat. This has an attack where you discard all the energy from this thing. All the energy this time around. Only does 70 damage, but if you discard all the energy, you can also paralyze. So, somewhat cool, I suppose, but it's mostly actually used in a funny gimmick deck later on, solely for the fact that it can accelerate energy into play. Fighting doesn't really have a lot of energy acceleration, so if you combine this with like Energy Switch, it's kind of neat. The problem, of course, is drawing all of those cards, right? That can be kind of difficult to do, so yeah. Moltres is the best general one, and that's mostly because it's a dark type, but it also plays well into the dark stuff in general. For the same energy cost, you don't discard this time. It does 20 plus 50 for each prize the opponent has taken. If you know anything about how good Charizard is at the moment, yeah, its damage numbers are a lot better, let's just put that out of the way, but when the opponent is down to like 2 prizes left, this is doing 220 damage on a 1 prizer for like no recoil cost or anything. It's actually super good, and a lot of basic V-based decks and like V-Star stuff later on can take advantage of this and like accelerate 2 energy down to it with its own ability, attach 1 for turn. Suddenly you've got an attacker going just instantly, which is scary to think about. Dragonite V sees play later on in Lost Box. This guy's actually really strong. Shred is not too good, but Dragon Gale is a very powerful attack. 230 HP on the basic V, by the way, so it's not even that easy to one-shot. 250 damage for 2 water and a lightning, and then it also does 20 to each of your bench Pokemon. Kind of a rough cost to end with there, but 250 damage is enough to one-shot any other basic V, including like 1 or 2 of the really frail ones if you have like 1 damage ping on them with even if they have Cape Toughness. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, this is used in Lost Box more than anything. You can't Frostmoth to this because it's not a water type, so that's a bit difficult. There is a lightning accelerant in the form of Flaffy over here that we'll talk about in just a sec. This is literally just electric from Gen 5, so whatever. But the problem is taking 1 lightning, not 2, makes it a bit difficult to keep reloading this thing. And also the self-damage could be kind of annoying for that kind of card, so I don't know. It's a really, really good card though, and definitely sees a ton of play later. Mew from Celebrations is pretty dang cool, to be honest. This is your replacement for Jirachi, to be honest. You look at the top 6 of the deck when this is active, and if you find an item, you can put it into the hand. It's only got 1 retreat, it does not put itself to sleep, so that's kind of cool. If you can just pay that 1 retreat switch out, very nice card. It's not played in nearly as many copies as Jirachi was. I think deck building philosophy changed a fair bit at this point, and realistically we don't have space to play 4 of this. But it's a very, very good card nonetheless. 60 HP is a problem in Lost Mine formats, however, so that's a bit of a shame. I did say Flaffy was basically electric, but just in case you don't remember what that is, it's a 90 HP 2 retreat lightning type that once during your turn you may attach a lightning from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Per Flaffy, so if you get multiples of these out, you do actually get to accelerate a ton as well. This is it's an extremely good card, but there's 2 big problems right now. One is bench damage, because Urshifu is very unkind to this thing, and that's why we don't really see it in any good result stuff. And the second is that we don't really have anything good to use it with. We will discuss the deck later on, the one that died to rotation, but there just isn't really anything good in Lightning right now. Lightning has kind of lost all of its strong stuff, and the one good Lightning card here does not need this kind of acceleration. So yeah. I'm going to mention the Skiploom and the Jumpluff here because I know Sai really wants to play them. He's not managed to find a deck skeleton for it, so he'd have to build it himself. Oh no. The Skiploom, they're Rapid Strike cards here. If you attach an energy from the hand to the Skiploom, you get to search your deck for the Jumpluff to evolve into it, which is pretty cool. The Jumpluff itself is only 90 HP, so you could level ball search it, I suppose, which is just typical for Jumpluff, I guess. They all have zero retreat too, which is kind of neat. The whole thing with this Jumpluff is it gets to attack twice each turn. If the first one KOs something, your opponent has to put a new thing, blah 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 blah. Yeah, it's the same thing. Its regular attack for a single grass energy only does 60 damage, which is not super impressive, but it doesn't have to use its regular attack. Unlike the Diplin that came out in the most recent set, Twilight Masquerade, this can use any attack it has access to. Which means you can use the Rapid Strike scrolls in order to give it different attacks. One of them, Fighting Double Colors, does 30 to each of the opponent's Pokemon, and you get to do that twice. So if you can manage to put enough energy on, you can do 60 to each of the opponent's Pokemon. 90 if you put the throwing coach down and it's a benched V. Very cool. Is it good? Almost definitely not. But is it fun? Yeah, probably. So that's why we kind of want to play it, but we just need to find a deck. Entei is interesting. It's a 120 HP fire type single strike, so a little bit off the type curve, but yeah, we could probably work with it. For a fire and a colorless, it does 10 for each damage counter on all of your benched single strike Pokemon. That's kind of neat. The single strike stuff is built to like self-damage a reasonable bit here and there, so you might be able to stock up some stuff that way. And I mean, it can self-damage itself as well, but like it takes 2 fire to do that, so good luck, I suppose. But it's kind of cool. I don't know if it's actually good though. I don't think fire is a particularly strong type for hitting things at the moment, and you have to play fire energy somehow for this. Just seems weird. Suicune and its partner Ludicolo over here is an absurd deck at the moment. 210 HP is on the frail side, but it is a 2 prizes, so it has that going for it. And it's got a really good 2 energy attack and a really good ability that you are going to see on 2 of its brethren as we move forward and we actually get them to release. Fleet-footed, if it's in the active spot, lets you draw a card. And then Blizzard Rondo does 20 damage plus 20 more for every bench Pokemon in play. So full bench on both sides caps out at 220 for 2 energy. Very, very good. It is a little frail and it is a 2 retreater, so like you can air balloon this is kind of good, but realistically you're probably just giving up the 2 prizes and most attacks in retaliation, but it's not giving up 3 prizes, so you do get more attacks out with this stuff, which is neat. What makes it actually strong though is the Ludicolo. When you evolve into this Ludicolo, your basic Pokemon do 100 more damage that turn to the opponent's active. So, doesn't do anything by itself, but if you evolve into this, you get to effectively jump up to the 300 sort of range with this. And that's enough to start KOing tag teams, which is busted, let's just put it how it is. Especially when Choice Belt comes out, this ends up being really insane. And it's a very, like, accessible attack, right? You get to Melanie to this thing and then just attach 1. Can even be a capture energy that you attach because it's got a Cutlass in its cost. Stupid strong attack. Pepper's going to be running this deck this round, I think, so very good. Medicham is the Thinker's Rapid Strike card. It's only used for Yoga Loop, but that Yoga Loop for 2 energy puts 2 damage counters on one of the opponent's Pokemon. Big deal, right? It's like terrifically bad as a 210 2 prizer thing. But if you KO something with this, you get to take another turn immediately. The opponent doesn't even get to draw a card, you just take another turn straight up. If one of your Pokemon did use this attack last turn though, you don't get to use it again. So you don't just get to chain Yoga Loops and win the game that way. But the idea with Rapid Strike now is that we have Inteleon to ping stuff down, we can get them down to 2 damage counts remaining. Doesn't even have to be a multi-prizer, just take a single pricing is fine for that turn. Yoga Loop that card, get the knockout, take a whole other turn, and then like Urshifu can come in and Rapid Flow or something there. Or Zeraora could come in, because you have attacked with a Rapid Strike, guys, so you could snipe with that too. The Rapid Strike stuff is now fully into its whole like snipe spread type stuff, and this is a huge boon to that strategy. The Thinker's deck for sure. I'm gonna try it at some point. Don't know if it's gonna be right now, but it's a very, very powerful card. Altaria is a neat dragon type to come out. It's 90 HP, so levelable, searchable. Doesn't have a retreat cost, so it's a good pivot too with Escape Rope, that's kind of fun. And you get to search your deck for a supporter card and top deck it. So if you play this alongside a Rangaroo, you could actually draw that supporter as well, and be pretty good. So yeah, I like it, it's alright. Milotic I think comes up maybe once at some point. It's a Rapid Strike Pokemon with the Do Guard ability. If the opponent places a supporter from their hand, prevent all effects of that card done to you or your hand. So there are a couple of times where like hand rip type stuff comes in. Think Airy at the moment, actually. This would technically be an out to that. You don't want to play it because of the way current control is, but like that sort of effect, right? Or Flannery is one I think that you could use against it. So it's like, it's alright. Very, very niche though. Tropius I'm mostly noting because it's another one of these Retaliate type cards. For a Grass and a Colorless it does 120 if one of your guys was knocked out by an attack on the opponent's last turn. It's hits for Grass weakness. If that ever is relevant, then this guy would be cool. Salamence is an attempt at a stage 2 attacker. It's an attempt, I say, because stage 2 attackers are like non-existent, but whatever. 170 HP, so on the bulkier side, still too frail, but I mean that's modern design for you. Its ability forces the opponent to switch once if you want to. It's Repel, so that sometimes comes up. It's not super good, but hey, it's free, so kind of whatever. For a fire and a water energy, you do 100 damage, but if the opponent's active already has damage on them, 120 more. So I think the idea is you're supposed to use this with either like Zigzagoon Scoop Up Net or like Ping with Inteleons or something. You do 220, but the problem is it's for 2 different energy without acceleration, because it's really hard to do that right now on the Dragon type, right? And it's not even a Pokemon V, so Melanie can't work with it. Like, what are you supposed to do, right? It's a stage 2, you gotta keep chaining it somehow, and it doesn't even do enough damage to one-shot VMAXs, so like, what are we doing with this, right? But it's close. It's a really cool idea, because giving up just one prize on these things is always a trade of economy, right? And in theory, it's really good, but stage 2 just kills it entirely. Kyogre is a Celebrations All-Star. You'll see this quite a bit in a lot of, again, big thinker decks in Lost Box stuff later. There's a very dumb meme deck you can do with it this round, though, with a couple of the other cards we'll talk about from the Gen 5 part of this. Aqua Storm is the attack of choice here for 2 water and the colorless. Discard the top 5 of your deck and then choose 2 of the opponent's bench Pokemon. For every energy that you discarded that way, you do 50 damage. So if you can discard a full 5, that will do 250 to 2 of the opponent's bench, in a format where we don't have Mew or Manaphy. Yikes. The problem, of course, is loading this thing and also getting the energy to the top of the deck. So currently, this is a Quadzar style thing where you play as many energy as you can and just try and force it. We'll talk about the other 2 Pokemon that make that happen later. Rayquaza is the hype deck of this round, which does absolutely nothing, but might still try and see play anyway, depending on how bored we get. I don't know. 210 HP Rapid Strike Pokemon, but it's Dragon and it uses Fire and Lightning, so it's off type entirely. This is very reminiscent of the Gen 5 Ray, where it does damage based on the basic Lightning and basic Fire that you discard. So it really has nothing to do with Rapid Strike. Very weird thing for it here. You do 20 plus 80 for each energy that you discard. The problem is the basic V is locked to discarding only 2 energy, so it could cap at 180, which is nothing, so like whatever. The VMAX does not have a cap, but then you've still got to get it in and out all the time. It's a free 20 HP, at least it's a 2 retreat this time. Most of the time Rays that aren't like the Mega one have a free energy retreat, so at least you can get it in and out a bit easier with Air Balloon, but like, really? Its ability lets you discard your hand and draw 3 cards once a turn. Kind of cool. You could probably use this with like Rose and stuff like that in order to get enough energy out, but in order to KO anything relevant, 4 energy is really the discard count to KO VMAXs. You need 3 to destroy like basic Vs, which is fine, but 3 energy for 2 prizes, it's tough. It's really tough to do. The obvious synergy here is with Flaffy to accelerate to the bench and stuff that way, but it's just too vulnerable, really. Like, what does this do against Urshifu just sniping down your Flaffies and stuff, right? If you build your deck that way. And if you try and build it with Rose and everything, that's probably like okay, but it's going to be really hard to keep chaining the attacks, so just not a very good card. Zoroark is probably the best card in here that never was. There was technically one regional where it did well right near the end of its lifespan. Phantom Transformation is crazy in theory though. It lets you choose a stage 1 in your discard pile that isn't Zoroark and just like swap it with the Zoroark. You discard this Pokemon and all cards attached to it and then just put that Pokemon in its place. Very, very cool. There's a lot of stuff that comes out that's like double colorless to do Thing, which would be like twin energy to do Thing, right? And in theory, makes a big Zora box deck very possible. We are going to note Pokemon that are useful for that as we go forward. There's a couple that we're seeing down here as well. But just note, this deck never really took off, unfortunately. It's just really difficult to do, I think, is the main thing. And again, right now, anything that isn't a V or a VMAX is just destroyed by Rapid Strike Urshifu existing, so you've got to keep that in mind. And to a lesser extent, Jolteon. Jolteon does kind of ruin a lot of stuff here as well. So, the 2 Pokemon that go with Kyogre in this set are the Cryogonal and the Volcarona. Cryogonal, for a single energy, it lets you, water energy specifically, should note, lets you look at the top 6 of your deck, attach any number of basic energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So the idea is to get 2 Kyogre down, look at the top 6 of your deck, find their all energy because the deck plays almost 40 of them, and attach them to the Kyogres to fully charge them up. If you run out of energy, or if you need an attack that actually hits the active, because Kyogre can only do 120 for 4, it's kind of ridiculous, you use the Volcarona V. This attack is essentially the same as Infinity from Victini, but it takes 1 energy this time. 20 damage, plus 20 for each basic energy in your discard pile, and then you shuffle all of those energy back into the deck. So you try and hit the bench as much as possible with a Kyogre, but if they're trying to get cheeky and they don't actually bench stuff, then you go in with the Volcarona, and the Volcarona can one-shot the active by doing like 300, 400 damage or whatever, and go ahead and just like win the game from there. So it's kind of neat. Fire Blast doesn't really matter in this context, but it's a really cool little deck. It's, again, very Quadsar-like. Very silly deck, to be honest. I'm not really sure if the Taurus Dragons here are actually that worth noting, but Reshiram has got the same attack as what the old Tapu Koko did with Flying Flip. Scorching Wind for a twin energy does 20 to each of the opponent's bench, which is pretty cool. It doesn't do damage to the active this time, that is kind of annoying, but effectively doing 100 damage spread for a twin energy is pretty cool if the opponent plays into it. Both it and Zekrom have an attack for 2 of their type plus a colorless that does 160 if the opposite one is on the bench. So that's kind of where the main power I think would come in here. This would be like a Flaffy deck to me, where you use the Zekrom as the main front attacker, but the Reshiram can set things up in the early game, which is kind of cool. Zekrom can also discard an opponent's stadium card in play. That does sometimes matter, so don't like discount it entirely. It's kind of cool. The Kyurem over here I think is really good later on. This essentially has the same attack as like Qianpao nowadays, but it takes a bit more setup to do. For 2 water and a metal energy, this dragon type does 60 for every water that you discard across your board. So it can do unlimited damage, which is really good. The problem is charging it right now, because again, it's not a water type this time, it's a dragon, which means we can't use Frostmoth, which makes it really hard to use right now. However, when stuff like Palkia comes out later on, we can get a good attack with this as a single prizer, and then in Chien-Pao Bat's Caliber, you could definitely use this if you wanted to. It's a bit clunkier, maybe, but I mean, they're playing Lightning Energy and Iron Hands right now. You could absolutely do a similar sort of thing here, and not rely on Chien-Pao quite as much, which would be pretty good. Pumpkaboo is the replacement to Marshadow. This lets you discard a Stadium card in play, but it only works when you bench it from the hand. So not only does it stay in play, it also doesn't work if you lead with it, which is unfortunate. So not as good, still sees a ton of play because Path to the Peak is really, really good, and removing it is kind of important. The Gourgeist is a very funny meme card for a twin energy. It does 60 for each psychic Pokemon that you find in the top 6 cards of your deck. You then get to shuffle those Pokemon back, and any cards that weren't psychic Pokemon get discarded. So it's similar to a Gyarados that was out in, I think it's Distilled Blast was the attack, that was at like the end of Gen 6 or whatever, where it just does a bunch of damage for the energy. This time it keeps the Pokemon and it doesn't discard the energy like the Gyarados did, sort of thing. So it's a little bit better, but also just a humongous meme. Very funny though, and that's why we're noting it here. Yveltal actually does see some play later on because Cry of Destruction is pretty cool. For a twin energy, this discards up to 3 special energy from the opponent's Pokemon. Double Turbo, when it comes out, is going to rule the roost. And there's a lot of other cards that special energy which are really good in this generation. So yeah, keep an eye on this. It might actually matter when like Double Turbo comes into play. Zygarde is interesting with the Cherrim that we saw before. For a Grass, a Fighting, and a Colorless, this Rapid Strike Pokemon, so you could use Rapid Strike energy with this, I guess, 40 damage to one of the opponent's Pokemon for each prize the opponent has taken. So very similar to the Moltres in that aspect, where it does more when the opponent has done a bunch of stuff themselves. This caps out at 200, which is fine. I mean, 200 Snipe is really cool, right? But yeah, you gotta kind of set yourself up for this one to be powerful, I think. It's in a weird typing for Rapid Strike, but it does get to use Rapid Strike energy because of the fighting in its cost. So it's doable, just very strange. Yeah, if you need more sniping, I guess that's a thing, but it's mostly useful for the single prize stuff. We'll talk about the rest of the components of the deck as we go here. Lycanroc VMAX is somewhat interesting. It auto KOs one of the opponent's Pokemon that has 60 or less HP remaining. Cool, I guess. Single energy kind of does that. It's not super good otherwise though, so I'm not convinced on it. Like, Max Edge is strong, don't get me wrong, but good luck getting 2 fighting the colorless on this thing, right? 190 Snipe 30, fine, whatever. Drampa is at least noteworthy just because of the... if this was a Rapid Strike Pokemon, this would be insane because of that cost. For a Water and a Fighting Energy, this does 160 if your Pokemon have any damage counters on them anywhere. I think if this was a Single Strike Pokemon, it would also be kind of insane, right? If your bench has got any damage on it. Single Strike always has damage on it, so that would be neat too. But it doesn't have a tag, so oh well. Artwork appreciation though, our boy is always on point. Lunala is a very interesting card from Celebrations. Luna Pain for a twin energy doubles the amount of damage counters that are on each of the opponent's Pokemon. Cool in theory, way too hard to set up. It is a stage 2, so like, again, massive good luck with that, right? Spread damage is good, but I think we're more about sniping stuff down at the moment rather than big spread. But you could theoretically get there. It's cool. Just, yeah, underwhelming too because of the stage 2 part. Marshadow, mostly noting because Shadow Flicker is funny. It's not good because the opponent just gets to switch off it, but I guess Rapid Hunt could be kind of good for the Malamar deck, right? For a single colorless energy, search your deck for up to 2 Rapid Strike cards, put them into hand. That could get you set up, so like, it's got a reasonable thing there. If your opponent somehow doesn't switch and also gets KO'd in the turn after you Shadow Flicker, then you do take an extra prize, but again, very much good luck with that, right? It's okay though, just because of that first attack. Feeble, I don't think ever actually saw play, but is a very interesting card because that Nick It that like Marnies the opponent is still in format and very, very annoying. When you evolve into this thing, you can have either, both players even, Marnie themselves effectively, the negative Marnie. You bottom deck your hand and draw 4 cards. Both players have to do that. This is kind of okay for you though, because this ends up working out as essentially a second supporter for the turn, right? It does disrupt the opponent too, which is kind of fun, but it also lets you go ahead and do like a research or a boss, and also get extra cards out too. The real problem in this is it's 100 HP and not 90. If this was level ball searchable, I think I'd be jamming this in a couple of decks. Because again, the Nickit is disgusting as well, so yeah. Eldegoss is one of the things that you would play with the Zygarde that we saw there, but it's more useful for Regidrago down the bottom alongside the Cherrim. Once per turn, it's Professor's Ladder. Search your deck for up to 2 basic energy, put them into the hand. If you're playing the grass stuff with the Cherrim, your non-V Pokemon get to have grass acceleration anywhere that they want, so you search for 2 grass, get it down. You also get to search for off-type stuff here as well though, so you can search for fighting energy for the Zygarde, or fire energy for the Regidrago, as we'll talk about at the end of the bit here. Flapple and Appleton basically have the same idea as their attack stuff here. Fighting Tackle's not super good because it takes too many weird energy stuff, but there's Zorobox cards that can attack for a single energy. Acidic Mucus does 50 for each of the opponent's Pokemon in play that have abilities. Really good against certain decks, especially New VMAX later on, but Inteleon in general you'll do a lot of damage against here. And Thick Mucus for the same cost. 70 for each special energy that's on the opponent's Pokemon. Not the defending Pokemon, all of them. So really good against particular stuff like Lugia later on. So yeah, very unique attackers for the Zoroark deck to basically go with there. Ice Skew is very annoying. Block Face is the only thing that this really does, but for a water and a double colorless, 70 and the opponent's basics cannot do damage to this thing next turn. Most decks don't get super shut down by this, but there's a couple of decks that, especially like I would say Lost Box later on, but they put damage counters. This only prevents damage. But there are a couple of decks that rely very heavily on basics only for their stuff. Like Suicune would get kind of bodied by this, right? You'd have to start going in with the Inteleon, and that's not too easy to do. So yeah, funny attack. Drakesalt V, I don't think the V was any good, but it does prevent the opponent from attaching energy to the active Pokemon for 1 energy. That's kind of funny. The main thing here is the VMAX. For 330 HP, by the way, heckin' huge. For 1 lightning energy, this does 60, and then if it's damaged by an attack next turn, it puts 12 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. This is meant to be used as a solo deck, where you basically just use this one dude and put like a ton of damage stuff down for 1 energy and try and just heal it the whole time. There's a couple of heal cards there's 1 heal card in this set, but you even play stuff like Moo Moo Cheese and Potion just to actually heal it down. It is Cheryl compatible, of course, so that's a thing as well, but it takes a supporter. Sometimes you need to support it to draw the stuff, so yeah. Very stupid deck, but also really hard to deal with sometimes. Taking 120 recoil effectively puts it at 180 for 1 energy, right? Which is really a lot to deal with. We're going to skip over the regular Duraludon, even though it does have a single strike tag, because we have the one that takes less damage from attacks, so it has way more HP functionally. We're just going to go for the VMAX, because this actually did see play. 330 HP Dragon type, it prevents all damage done to it by Pokemon with special energy on them, thanks to its ability. And then G-Max Pulverization is a shred move for 2 metal and a fighting energy, 220 unaffected by any effects on the opponent's active. Kinda gross. I mean, it gets through itself obviously, so there is that. But Arcdura was actually a big deck in the format. Whether or not it was good is up to opinion. I know people like Azul really hated this deck, but it did see success, so there you go. Zacian V from Celebrations is not as good as a regular one, but still a pivotal part in a couple of decks as we go forward. Most notably Gardevoir when that comes out. This day is insane for that. Roar of the Sword is the main reason here. Just like the Leafeon, you can end your turn by searching your deck for a Psychic Energy and attaching it to one of your Pokemon. It does do 60 plus 30 for each Psychic Energy attached to itself for 3 colorless. That's what actually makes it playable for Gardevoir later on, but Roar of the Sword is really good at the moment. If you are going to play Dragapult, and I don't recommend it, but it was a top deck at the time apparently, if you're going to play Dragapult, I would include this, so that you can actually get an energy attachment going early, because otherwise, you're kind of going to be cooked. This could also be used in Calyrex, because they rely on their VMAX stuff a lot, and so being able to actually hit something like Zamazenta would be really helpful. So, yeah. Regieleki, for some reason, has got a 2 energy retreat, but whatever. It's good. Terra Spark for 2 lightning and a colorless does 120, discards all the lightning from it, and does 40 to 2 of the opponent's bench Pokemon. Very strong attack overall. This would be another thing for Flaffy Box. Again, Flaffy Box has a really hard time because of the lack of bench barrier, however. So, tough stuff there. But 120 and Snipe 40 twice is good setup stuff. It's on a single prizer. Like, I think there's something here. Just, it's a bit difficult maybe to chain would be the problem. Also, discarding all lightning, like I suppose it's only got 120 HP, it's probably dying, but if it doesn't, discarding free energy kind of sucks for that attack, right? So, you maybe have to play some non-lightnings and then it gets weird. Regidrago is the main attacker for the Cherrim Eldegoss thing that the Zygarde was kind of useful for. For 2 grass and a fire energy, this does 240 damage on a 130 HP basic. Cool. It does do 20 less for each damage counter that's on this thing though, so if the opponent plays like Inteleon pings and stuff, they could maybe lower the damage output. But here's the thing, right? Most of the time, this type of attack is really bad because you just do less damage as you get like into 2-shot range. But this is a 130 HP single prizer. It's going to get one-shot by like everything in the format, right? We've hardly seen any useful cards that do less than 130 damage. Which means the downside almost doesn't exist, right? Like, the only time this is a downside is if the opponent literally just like pings you know, like Inteleon pings one on the bench while KOing the active or something. Most of the time you are just going to get one shot anyway, so it's 240 damage for free energy. It's really, really strong. Finally, I know we've been nearly an hour into this, but we do have the trainers to look at here as well, so let's just go through them. Boost Shake is a disaster. I don't know why they printed this. This lets you evolve one of your Pokemon in play and end your turn for doing so. But you're allowed to do this on the first turn that the Pokemon was put into play. So if you open this with Coughing in the active, that means you get Ability Lock before the opponent even gets a turn. Which is stupid, and has actually ended up seeing tournament success much later on in the format. This is a card that you would use in Eternatus decks, potentially, at the moment, to try and combat the whole like fighting flaw that they have. Dream Ball is really bad, but if you take it as a face-down prize card, you get to play it and search your deck for any Pokemon and put it onto the bench. Any Pokemon, which means you can put like VMAXs and stuff down, but you have to take it as a prize. And there are ways of doing it. We have Peonia, which if this is in your hand, Peonia can then let you put it down as a prize card when you know where it is. But it's gross and stupid and gimmicky, and you've still got to take a prize in order to do it, so good luck with that. Lucky Ice Pop is a very funny meme card. It heals 20 for new actives, so old school potion, but if you flip heads, you get to put the Lucky Ice Pop back into the hand instead. Mahone has got a good video with the Dracozolt actually, where he flips like 7 or 8 heads in a row with this and just fully healed it. Very stupid. Rescue Carrier is really cool. This would have been really good if Mew still existed, right? Put up to 2 Pokemon with 90 HP or less each from your discard pile into your hand. So anything that's levelable searchable can also be recovered, and you can recover 2 of them. The biggest thing I would like immediately think of with this is of course Flaffy. That's like half the idea, but think of someone like Durant as well, right? We do have Devour Durant in the format, so we have the old Gen 5 thing possible. This lets you get 2 Durants back if the opponent snipes 2 of them, which is pretty funny. Energy Acceleration is really the problem in that deck at the moment. Once we get Double Turbo though, look out world. Switching Cups is the stupidest card I've read in a while. Switch a card from your hand with the top one of your deck. It's Oranguru, but on an item. Why are we playing this? I don't know. Toy Catcher is silly. It lets you gust up one of the opponent's bench Pokemon, but only if they have 50 or less remaining HP, which usually aren't the ones that you want to gust up in the active anyway, but details, right? If you manage to just miss a KO and they didn't like Cheryl heal or something, you could maybe do something with this, but again, good luck with that. Copycat exists again here. This is the last time I think this is printed for the time being, like at the time of recording. I don't think it's very good in this format though, because just like most of the time, when it's in format for whatever reason, it's like the hand sizes aren't very big right now. But I guess keep an eye on this, because Lost Box later on would be a really good one to use this again. So maybe you could have a Tech 1 copy of it later. Gordy is really bad, unfortunately. Looks at the top 7 of your deck, puts any energy you find there into the hand and shuffles the rest back. Like, really? Why are we not just playing Energy Surge? Oh, really, really bad card. Professor Burnett is used in Lugia later on. This is the balanced form of Battle Compressor. Looks at the top, searches your deck for any 2 cards and discards them as a supporter card. That really shows how strong Battle Compressor was, right? That they had to lower the amount of cards it discards and also put it as a supporter card, and then it's balanced. Very weird. Raihan is really, really good for single prizes, but does see some play in like VMAX decks and stuff as well. If one of your Pokemon was KO'd during the opponent's last turn, you attach a basic energy from your discard pile to any one of your Pokemon, and then if you manage to do that, search your deck for any card and put it into the hand. So really good for the single prize stuff. You could get Rare Candy out the deck as well as an energy acceleration. But even if you can time it right for like VMAXs and stuff, search your deck for any card to like go alongside that, and also get a second energy out is pretty good. So like even Urshifu could probably use this, right? Because you could attach a fighting from the discard and then search for Rapid Strike energy for the turn. Kind of cool. Zinnia's Resolve is like the 3rd best draw card I think we have at the moment, personally speaking. You discard 2 cards from your hand when you play it, and then draw 1 for each of the opponent's Pokemon in play. This can draw up to 6 as a result, which is pretty good. The problem, of course, is that it relies on the opponent. Just like Steven's Advice and Erica's Hospitality before it. Sketchy is the thing here. But the fact that it doesn't rely on basic Pokemon like so many of these things do, think Honey is a good example, then it's fine. Like, draw 6 is good. Sometimes the discard is needed as well, so you'll see this very occasionally. Stadium cards now. Crystal Cave is very good later on, but also kind of good at the moment too. Zacian decks can use this, I believe. Heal 30 from each of your Dragon and Metal Pokemon once per turn. Each of them, so it's good against spread stuff as well. Kind of fun. Shopping Center lets you put a tool card from one of your Pokemon back into the hand once per turn. So that's kind of alright. I mean, if you have multiple different tools you want, say Air Balloon and, I don't know, like a Rapid Strike Scroll or something, you could swap between them. It's very niche, it doesn't really come up too often, but if you don't have a counter stadium you need otherwise, maybe it comes up. Very, very specific deck for it though. Stormy Mountains is the other reason why Flaffy Rayquaza was thought about so much. It is Brooklet Hill, but for basic Lightning and Dragon Pokemon instead of Water and Fighting. So you just get an extra search with this to bench out basics from those types. Very, very strong, but again, the deck is just a little bit too underwhelming for other reasons. Good counter stadium though, which is useful against like Leafeon, Galar Mine and whatnot. On to the item cards now, or the tool cards even. We do have a couple of gloves. We've got actually only the one. No, we got 2. We got the rubber gloves in here as well. So if you are going against a lightning or a fighting deck, we do have tools that can let you do extra damage to those in particular. If you somehow are like sort of weak to them, I mean everything like Urshifu is a big anti to this, right? But like, it's just trying to get enough damage out of it where it actually makes a difference is kind of difficult, because one-shotting Urshifu, not really happening, but two-shotting it, you probably can do that anyway. But if you're just a little bit short and your Urshifu matchup would be benefited by this, go ahead and play it, it's kind of cool. Elemental Badge is what makes Jolteon actually tick here. If you attach this to a Gen 1 Evolution V, then it costs, it pays 1 less to use its attacks. So now Max Thunder Rumble costs 1 lightning to do that 100-100 snipe. Makes it really, really good to just keep throwing around, which is very good in my opinion. I like the card a lot, so there you go. Could also make Vaporeon attack for no energy to do Bubble Pod, which is pretty good. Flareon technically benefits as well, but again, it's just a bad Pokemon, so sorry. Full Face Guard is kind of interesting. If you don't have an ability, it is Hard Charm. 20 less damage from each of the opponent's Pokemon. Cool, I suppose. There's a lot of attackers that don't have an ability, so that's kind of neat. But the problem is, how often are you actually going to rely on that, like 20 less to do good stuff? I don't know. It's fun, I'm just not sure for standard. Moon and Sun Badge is really good for the Espeon Umbreon V stuff here. It is mostly used with Umbreon as a control thing later on, because it prevents supporter cards from doing anything to the Pokemon it's attached to. So this prevents your Umbreon V from being gusted up and KO'd by anything, right? You can't boss the stuff up. So that's cool. This will then let you have a gust that is uncontested at any point, really. Somewhat strong. The Rapid Strike scroll this time is designed to work with Rayquaza, I guess, for a Fire and a Lightning. Discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, snipe 90 on one of the opponent's bench. Very expensive, to be honest, not really worth it, but it's funny, I suppose. Sylveon's badge is one that gives up one fewer prize card when the Sylveon is KO'd, by damage specifically. Funny. It does come up sometimes. There are a couple of Sylveon decks that play it. I know the one Pepper was playing it. It's okay. The problem is it's very easy to disrupt, right? Like, if the opponent just tool scrappers it, then you're kind of screwed. So I don't really like this sort of one too much. I do much prefer like Elemental Badge, because I think even this is a little bit reactive, which is kind of, it's a bit awkward, so yeah. The single strike scroll this time is meant to work with Duraludon. For a fighting 2 metal and 2 colorless, you do 300 and discard every energy on the Pokemon. So clearly not as good as like G-Max 1 Blow overall, but I guess if you put excess energy on the thing, you could probably do like one giant hit to KO VMAXs. With 2 single strike energy down on this, you do 340 KO everything, right? So I guess you could. Very, very awkward though. Such an expensive attack. The Glaceon and Leafeon badge makes them have no retreat cost and no weakness. Fine, but realistically, that's not the problem for those decks. Like, sure, Glaceon would benefit from not being metal weak, but Glaceon also just doesn't do enough, so it's not good enough in the first place. Leafeon doesn't really have to worry about its weakness, because fire types are not very good in this format. The only fire type I think that's even relevant is like Victini, which sure, you probably lose to Victini, but like, Victini deck is also bad, so, you know, whatever. Spirit Mask is a very weird card. If the Pokemon this is attached to is active and gets damaged, then the opponent has to discard a card from their hand. Problem is, you kind of probably want to disrupt them with Marnie if that's going to be the thing, and it's like, they choose what they discard out of their hands, so it's just not very good, unfortunately. And then finally, the special energy from the set is also not particularly good. It's another one kind of like Dream Ball. If you take this as a face-down prize, you get to attach it to one of your Pokemon. It's a colorless energy. Doesn't really do anything. So, yeah. That is the set. Massive stuff, obviously, to go over. A lot of really fun cards out of here. The problem we're having with this format at the moment is that it's like very much dependent on did you get enough Inteleon pieces down, and also like Snipe is crazy, right? Like everything has to be built so carefully around Urshifu. Even Crobat has stopped seeing a lot of play because of stuff like that. It's just kind of nutter butters, as you would call it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm a fan of the format, but I do really like some of the cards that came out here. I'm really interested to see a little bit more about how some of them can actually like work. So yeah, looking forward to that. And it's also not Fusion Strike, so that's a thing. Thank you very much for listening. If you have made it this far, I do very much appreciate it. And until next time, take care.